So, I finished Elden Ring a couple weeks ago, and I wanted to share my thoughts for the people who are still thinking it over. Elden Ring isn't my first Souls-like, but Souls-like also aren't exactly my type of game. I've played Dark Souls 2 and 3 and Neo 2 to the end, but I haven't exactly finished them fairly. Basically, while there was a lot of things to like about each of those games in terms of visuals, atmosphere, style of storytelling, etc., the difficulty was a big point of contention for me. What that means is basically that while playing each of those games, I would eventually run into a wall that I just couldn't break, and my patience would run out, and I would just look at the clock, see how much time I've spent on trying to beat this boss or this section or whatever, and I would be like, okay, you've wasted way too much time, you didn't have any fun, let's just get through it and move on. So that's where I would resort to using, cheats or trainers. It's a single player game, so I don't really care. It's not affecting anyone else. But having said that, because of that difficulty factor, I was not exactly rushing to try Elden Ring. Obviously, there were other factors like, performance issues on the PC and stability issues and the like. But my main concern was actually whether or not I would actually be able to finish the game. And I'm actually happy to say that I did manage to do that. Elden Ring is actually the first Souls-like game that I managed to finish fairly. And I'm not saying that to flex, I'm clearly not a good Souls-like player. I'm saying that because there's a more important point to make. Why did I actually manage to finish Elden Ring when I couldn't finish, the other Souls-likes without resorting to that kind of stuff? And the reason is very simple. When you play Elden Ring, you never really feel like you've hit a wall that you can't go past. And the reason for that is actually that the game is open world. And it's one of the few games where the open world really works in its favor because, when you reach that point that you're like spending too much time trying to be the boss or a section of the game and you're failing and you're getting frustrated, at some point you realize you can actually, as others have said, in their reviews, you can actually just turn around and go do other stuff in the game, explore other parts of the map. When you level up, you come back and you beat the crap out of that boss and you move on. And that was actually my tactic. So, like I said, really, really rare case of a game where the open world design choice really works in its favor. When it comes to the rest of the gameplay, I would say that if you've seen a review of any kind of Souls-like game, or if you've played any kind of Souls-like game, it's gonna sound very familiar. Basically, almost anything on the map wants to kill you, and it can kill you very brutally and very easily. And your job is to, well, not get killed, kill those main story-related bosses, and finish the story. And I'm deliberately not going into the story, even though the story itself is kind of vague and it's told in a very familiarly vague style, like any other Souls-like. But let's just say that the premise is that you're some kind of a banished hero and you're back in the land trying to become something they call Elden Lord. Basically, you're trying to gather what you need to repair that titular Elden Ring and become, pretty much a form of deity in the land, something like that. The game also features side quests, although not in a very traditional manner, as you may have been used to by playing, more conventional RPGs. In fact, there's no quest log in this game, which honestly I think it's kind of a downside to the game design. I'm not talking about necessarily having map markers for where you need to go or anything like that, but there's something to be said about lack of balance in their approach to vagueness when it comes to gameplay. Like, I'm fine with it in storytelling, but if you're telling me, hey, there's a side quest, you need to do something for this character, and you're not giving me the slightest hint as to what I need to do, or in some cases you're telling me what that character needs, but I have no clue where I need to go, not even the slightest hint of where I need to go, that's kind of bad, especially when you've got several of those side quests active at the same time. Your choices are write it up on a piece of paper or go to the Elden Ring wiki and use basically that as your quest log to keep track of each of those quests. And so yeah, I would say that's kind of a case of game designers maybe, to be honest, sniffing a bit too much of their own farts. But in any case, even with that, the game is very playable. And while technically it's not exactly in a polished state still on the PC, it's again very, very playable for the most part, although the performance, I will say, is still a bit uneven. Like, there are regions of the map that have much smoother performance than others. And then there are also instances where, in the same region, at one point you'll have excellent performance, and at, I don't know, maybe half an hour later you'll have significantly worse performance. And in a game like this that kind of requires you to be precise, to know when to block or dodge an attack or something like that, it can get you killed and cause some frustration. Because as we know, in Souls-like, when you die, that main currency, which is in this game called runes, is lost, or rather it stays at the last place you died, and if you get killed before you retrieve that stuff, it's lost forever. And it's happened to me quite a few times, unfortunately, that I've lost significant amounts of runes, which kind of slowed my progress. Speaking of progress and leveling up in this game is basically you spending some runes to hit a +1 on one of the attributes of your character. And because of the nature of the game, it's not really a good idea to spread those points around. It's a much better idea to focus on a couple of attributes that you've decided are going to be the basis of your build and just kind of build your character around that. Personally, I went with a dexterity intelligence build, some kind of a hybrid, mage warrior. That's what I was interested in because I very rarely play something like that, and I wanted to see what magic is like in a Souls-like game. And it worked pretty well for me, clearly, since I've managed to finish the game. But, it might not work well for you, so there are a bunch of other options. You can choose from. There are a bunch of weapons to choose from, weapon types, and then weapons within those weapons types. From daggers to swords, long swords, great swords, hammers, axes, magic wands, etc. Whips even. So in that sense, you can kind of choose your combat style from a wide variety of available options. The other thing that kind of helps, especially if you're like me and Souls-likes aren't exactly your type of game, is the summons. People have talked about them. We've also heard comments from hardcore players saying stuff like, just get good, don't use summons. My attitude is, if it's in the game, then the developers meant for it to be used. So yeah, I used summons, and I don't think that makes me by default a bad player or not hardcore enough or anything. I don't really even care about that. I care about having fun and finishing the game. And if summons help, you use them. And they're not exactly cheats, at least they weren't for me. The biggest help they give is that they draw attention from you to them. Yeah, they might contribute a bit to the, damage dealing aspect of things, but generally their main purpose is to kind of draw attention away from you to them. Summons aren't something you can, use anywhere. There are very specific areas where they can be used, and those areas are mostly boss rooms. There are, areas outside of boss rooms where you can use summons, but predominantly boss rooms, I would say. And that, I think, covers mostly my gameplay impressions. Like I said, some technical issues still exist. Hopefully, the devs will resolve them through patches. But also, like there are certain quality of life, I guess, whether they're nitpicks or not depends on the person, but I'd say that they are worth mentioning. One of them is that you can't, in a straightforward way, properly pause the game, which is kind of a pain in the ass. And again, one of those moments I mentioned where I think the designers just, sniff their farts a little bit too much. I mean, yes, the game is difficult, but being able to pause the game so you can answer the phone or go to the bathroom or have lunch or something, it's not gonna make the game suddenly super easy. It's not gonna detract from the experience. Just allow us to freaking pause the goddamn game. Same thing about saving the game. Although I would actually kind of call this a nitpick myself, but I'm still gonna mention it. Even though this is a huge RPG that I spent 170 hours to beat once, I don't have the option to save the game manually. Or rather, I do only at those certain locations called Sites of Grace, where you also level up and reset the state of enemies in the world. You also, when you do that, you don't get to choose the option to maybe save that point to a new save slot or something. It all goes to the same save slot, and I guess that's all, again, a part of the design philosophy. And it's something I have mixed feelings about because while I understand the view that the way you save the game can be a part of overall game design, I've always considered the ability to save the game at any time a basic quality of life feature that has been here since the early 90s. And if a game doesn't have it, I kind of deduct a bit of points. And yeah, that's really it. It's not exactly a game that's easy to recommend or recommend against because the sub-genre of Souls-likes is very specific, mainly due to that huge difficulty that the games come with. So if you think that this might interest you, consider giving it a try. If you don't want to risk being, frustrated a lot more than, having fun, then you should probably avoid Elden Ring and any other Souls-like. For me, I'm ultimately glad that I played it. I had fun with it overall, but I would be lying if I didn't say that there weren't some really, really frustrating moments as well. I mean, suffice to say that there hasn't been a game in a long time that I've cursed as much as this game. So take that for what you will. Hopefully it helps make your own decision, and I'll see you in the next one.